I was flying to Vegas on what I thought was a family reunion with my daughter and son-in-law, but the flight attendant suddenly whispered, "Pretend you're sick and get off the plane." I thought it was a joke, but she begged, "Please, I'm serious." 20 minutes later, I understood why. My name is Harold Mitchell. I'm 65 years old, and I spent 40 years building things: bridges, office complexes, shopping centers. You learn to read blueprints, spot structural problems before they become disasters. What I didn't see coming was my own family trying to kill me for $650,000. The afternoon sun blazed through my workshop window in Phoenix, catching dust particles floating in air that smelled of sawdust and WD-40. I was fixing an old drill press I'd owned for 30 years when I heard the front door open. Jennifer and Ricardo had been living in my guest house for 8 months, ever since Jennifer's real estate business started struggling, and Ricardo's accounting firm cut his hours. They barely spoke to me most days, which made their sudden appearance in my workshop feel wrong. Jennifer appeared first in the doorway, Ricardo behind her with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. His eyes found the tool rack, the workbench, anywhere but my face. My daughter looked tired, stressed in a way I hadn't seen since her divorce 5 years ago. The real estate market had been brutal lately, and I knew she was struggling to make her mortgage payments. "Dad, we need to talk." Jennifer's voice had that artificial sweetness I remembered from when she was 12 and wanted something expensive. I turned off the drill press, wiped my hands on an old shop rag. "About what?" Ricardo shifted his weight. "We've been thinking about family, about how we should spend more time together." His accent was slight, barely noticeable after 15 years in Arizona, but it always became more pronounced when he was nervous. "Quality time," Jennifer added, stepping into the workshop without invitation. She perched on my stool like she owned it. "Before life gets too busy." "Before what, exactly?" I kept my voice level, but my engineer's mind was already cataloging inconsistencies. They'd avoided me for months. Why this sudden change? "Just, you know how it is." Jennifer waved her hand dismissively. "Ricardo, tell him about Vegas." My son-in-law finally met my eyes, and what I saw there was desperation poorly masked by forced enthusiasm. I'd seen that look before in construction workers who'd made expensive mistakes and were trying to cover them up. "Vegas, Harold. Remember when Jennifer was little and we all went to that construction convention? Let's recreate those memories. A whole week together, fully paid, our treat." I set down my tools carefully. "You hated that trip. Said it was too hot." Jennifer spent the whole time complaining about the food, wanted to come home early. Ricardo's smile faltered. "We were different then. We see things differently now." The silence stretched. I studied them both. My daughter, who once brought me dandelions and called me her hero, and this man who'd somehow convinced her that her father was just an obstacle taking up space. Ricardo had always been charming, good with numbers, but there'd been something off about him lately. More phone calls, more stress, more time away from the house. "When would this trip be?" I asked. "Next week." Jennifer's response came too quickly. "Everything's arranged. We just need your yes." That evening, Jennifer insisted on cooking dinner. She never cooked. I sat at my dining table while she moved around my kitchen with uncomfortable familiarity, opening cabinets, using my dishes. Ricardo poured wine with excessive care, his hands trembling slightly when I asked about the trip's timeline. So this was planned without consulting me. I accepted the wine glass, watching him over the rim. "We wanted it to be a surprise," Ricardo said. "A good surprise." Jennifer set a plate before me, her movements calculated and precise. She'd worked in medical administration before switching to real estate, and that clinical efficiency showed in everything she did. "Dad, your life insurance policy is quite substantial. $650,000, right? Very responsible planning on your part." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "How do you know the amount?" Ricardo mentioned it once. She sat across from me, cutting her chicken into perfect uniform pieces. "Just conversation. We were talking about financial planning. You know how it is." I looked at my daughter. She was focused intently on her plate, refusing to meet my gaze. The mention of my insurance felt wrong, timed wrong, placed into casual dinner talk where it didn't belong. In 40 years of engineering, I'd learned that nothing was ever just conversation when money was involved. "I haven't been sleeping well lately," I said, testing them. "My chest feels strange sometimes, flutter-like. Maybe it's stress." Ricardo's eyes lit up for a split second before he caught himself. You should see a doctor. Have you seen a doctor? Harold worries too much. Jennifer cut him off smoothly. You look fine, Dad. Probably just the heat. You know how Phoenix summers affect everyone. They locked eyes then, just for a moment, but I caught it. Something passed between them, unspoken and knowing. My chest tightened, but not from any heart condition. In construction, when you see two workers glance at each other like that, someone's about to get hurt. After dinner, while they retreated to the guest house, I found printed flight confirmations on the table, already booked, my ticket already purchased for next Tuesday. They'd been certain I'd agree, so certain they'd made irreversible plans. I sat in my workshop long after midnight, holding an old photograph of Jennifer at age 7, gap-toothed and grinning, hugging my neck like I was the safest place in the world. That girl had become this woman, plotting something I couldn't quite name but felt in my bones. 40 years building structures had taught me one thing: problems start small. Hairline cracks in concrete, loose bolts in steel frames. You ignore them, they bring down the whole building. People leave evidence too, always. Patterns emerge when you step back and observe the whole structure, like reading blueprints for a building that's about to collapse. Morning came with pale desert light, and the decision I'd already made in darkness. I would go to Vegas. I would watch them carefully. I would gather evidence the way I'd taught young engineers to examine failed structures, with skepticism and attention to detail. Ricardo knocked on my workshop door at 7 o'clock, his smile too bright for the early hour. So, Harold, Vegas, what do you say? I'll go, I told him, watching his face. Relief flooded his features, followed by something else I couldn't quite identify. Satisfaction. Anticipation. Great. That's wonderful. He gripped the door frame. You won't regret it. Jennifer appeared behind him, her nod almost imperceptible. They'd won this round, or thought they had. But in construction, you learn that sometimes you have to let a structure show its weaknesses before you can fix it properly. I spent that morning packing methodically. Underwear, shirts, my medication bottles. I paused over those bottles, reading the labels as Jennifer's words echoed in my mind. Something about health, about my appearance, about not worrying. My hands moved almost on their own, placing the medications in my carry-on instead of checked luggage. A small act of caution, nothing more. But 40 years in construction had taught me that survival often depended on small acts, minor precautions that seemed paranoid until they saved your life, like wearing a hard hat in areas where nothing had ever fallen before. I also packed my old Leica camera, the one I'd used to document construction sites. If I was going to gather evidence, I'd need to document everything properly. The camera fit snugly in my carry-on next to the medications. Ricardo's car smelled of stale coffee and synthetic air freshener. I sat in the passenger seat watching Phoenix suburbs slide past. Neither of them spoke much during the drive. Ricardo gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. Jennifer stared out her window, phone in hand, typing rapidly and deleting messages immediately after sending them. I watched her reflection in the side mirror. Her face held that clinical blankness I'd come to recognize as her thinking expression, calculating variables and probabilities. It reminded me of how she used to look when working on math homework, except now she was calculating something far more sinister. Excited about Vegas, Dad? Ricardo's voice cracked slightly on the last word. Should I be? He missed the implication entirely. Of course. Family time, shows, relaxation, good restaurants. Relaxation, I repeated. Right. The silence resumed, heavier now. I watched familiar Arizona streets disappear behind us. The hardware store where I'd bought materials for countless home projects. The diner where Jennifer and I used to get pancakes when she was young, back when she thought I hung the moon. Each mile increased the pressure in my chest, the sense that I was being carried towards something irreversible. The airport appeared ahead, all concrete and glass and controlled chaos. Ricardo parked in short term, another oddity. We'd supposedly be gone a week, yet he chose the most expensive option. Small details, but they accumulated like stress fractures in a beam. I can handle my own bag, I said when Ricardo reached for my carry-on. Just trying to help, Harold. I'm 65, not 85. I shouldered the bag myself, noting how his face tightened at my show of independence. Security checkpoint arrived too quickly. Jennifer insisted I go through first, her hand firm on my shoulder, guiding me forward. I placed my carry-on on the conveyor belt, watching her watch the screen as my belongings passed through the X-ray machine. She leaned forward slightly, checking something, then relaxed when the bag emerged on the other side. "See? Easy," she said, but her relief seemed disproportionate to the simple act of airport security, unless she'd been worried about something specific showing up on that screen. At the gate, Ricardo and Jennifer boarded immediately with Zone 1, while my ticket relegated me to Zone 3. They disappeared down the jetway without looking back, leaving me standing among strangers, my carry-on handle digging into my palm. When my zone was finally called, I walked slowly, aware of the finality of each step. The jetway stretched ahead, that peculiar liminal space between solid ground and metal tubes suspended in nothing. The aircraft door yawned open, recycled air washing over me, carrying that distinct airplane smell of cleaning chemicals and thousands of previous passengers. I stepped inside, searching for my seat number, when a flight attendant approached. Her name tag read Beverly, and her face held professional pleasantness until she leaned close, pretending to check my boarding pass. "Pretend you're feeling ill and leave this aircraft." The words came out as an urgent whisper, her breath warm against my ear. I froze, hand tightening on my carry-on. "Excuse me, I don't understand." But she'd already moved away, tending to overhead bins and smiling at other passengers. I stood in the aisle, confused, looking between her retreating form and Jennifer and Ricardo in their seats 3 rows ahead. They hadn't noticed the exchange, too focused on their phones. Was this a joke? Some bizarre safety protocol? I took another step toward my row when Beverly returned, her professional mask cracking completely. "Sir, I'm begging you. You need to get off this plane now." I looked into her eyes then and saw genuine terror. Not concern, not confusion, terror. The kind that comes from knowing something specific and horrible. 40 years of reading people's faces, of distinguishing competence from incompetence, truth from lies, kicked in. This woman was serious. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious in my life." Her fingers dug into my sleeve. "Please trust me." "Dad, everything okay?" Ricardo's voice carried down the aisle, sharp with something that wasn't quite concern. I made the decision in a heartbeat, operating on pure instinct honed by 40 years of construction work. When someone yells, "Look out" on a job site, you don't ask questions, you move. My hand moved to my chest, fingers splaying over my shirt. "My chest," I gasped, the words coming out strangled. The fear was real, even if the symptom was manufactured. I stumbled, dropping to one knee in the narrow aisle. The performance came naturally, aided by the genuine terror coursing through my veins. In construction, you learn to sell an injury convincingly enough that safety inspectors take you seriously. This was no different, except the stakes were life and death. Immediate reaction. Flight crew surrounded me, voices overlapping in professional crisis mode. "Sir, can you breathe?" "Sir, stay with us." Hands under my arms, lifting, supporting. A wheelchair was called. Through the commotion, I caught Jennifer and Ricardo's faces. That's what I remember most clearly. Not concern, not worry, but disappointment. Pure, undisguised disappointment before their masks slammed back into place, and they performed concern for the audience around them. Jennifer stood from her seat, the movement aggressive before she softened it, making herself the worried daughter. "Dad, what's wrong? Should we come with you?" No, stay seated everyone," a crew member blocked the aisle. "We'll take care of him. Medical personnel are standing by." As they wheeled me backward down the jetway, I heard Jennifer's voice, low, and meant only for Ricardo, but carrying just enough in the quiet after crisis. "This ruins everything," Ricardo's hissed response. "Not here. Not now." The wheelchair carried me back through the jetway, back into the terminal, back to solid ground. My phone buzzed in my pocket as they settled me in the medical area. A text from Ricardo. "Harold, hope you feel better. We'll call when we land." I watched through the window as the aircraft pushed back from the gate as it began its slow taxi toward the runway. Jennifer and Ricardo were aboard that plane, growing smaller and more distant with each passing second. The physical separation felt absolute, like I'd crossed some invisible threshold and could never return to the innocence of not knowing. The plane disappeared from view, just another metal speck against blue desert sky. "Mr. Mitchell?" I turned. Beverly stood there, still in her uniform, but off duty now, her face pale and drawn. She glanced around the medical area, checking for listeners. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "Now, somewhere private." The medical room was small and windowless, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead with that persistent electrical hum that sets teeth on edge. A paramedic had just cleared me, vitals fine, probably anxiety, and left me alone on the examination table. Beverly entered, closed the door firmly, checked the hallway through the window once, then turned to face me. Her hands shook. "I need to show you something." Her voice trembled. "What I'm about to do could cost me my job, but I can't let this happen." I straightened on the table, paper crinkling beneath me. "Show me." She pulled out her phone with fingers that couldn't quite stay steady, unlocked it, navigated to her video library. I recorded part of a phone call in the restroom before boarding. "Your daughter's call." The phone screen showed a bathroom stall, mostly ceiling tiles and fluorescent lighting. The audio was muffled, but voices carried through the echo of tile and porcelain. Jennifer's voice, unmistakable in its clinical precision. "The pills will dissolve quickly in his drink. He won't taste anything." A pause. I could hear another voice, faint, on the other end. "Altitude makes heart attacks more plausible. Emergency at 30,000 feet. Medical response limited. Investigation harder." Another pause. $650,000. Ricardo's nervous, but committed. She laughed. Actually laughed. I watched the video once, twice, 3 times. Each viewing revealed new layers of horror. My daughter discussing my death like a business transaction, weighing logistics and timing, calculating profit margins on my life. Who was she talking to? My voice came out steady, surprisingly so. "I don't know." Beverly lowered the phone, but she mentioned the plan being in motion and Ricardo being on board. Those were her exact words. I looked at her directly. "Why did you do this? Risk your career for a stranger?" Something flickered across her face. Old pain, barely healed wounds. "My father." 3 years ago, his nephew convinced him to change his will. Then he fell downstairs. They ruled it an accident. Her jaw tightened. I couldn't prove anything. The regret has eaten at me ever since. When I heard that conversation, heard her plotting, I couldn't stay silent again. "I'm sorry about your father." "Don't be sorry." Her voice hardened. "Stop them." We exchanged contact information in my small notebook, the one I always carried out of engineer habit, precise, careful letters. Even in crisis, documentation instinct prevailed. We exchanged phone numbers. She promised to preserve the recording, understood it might become legal evidence. We shook hands. Her grip was firm despite the trembling. The taxi ride home took 40 minutes through Phoenix suburbs, past strip malls and chain restaurants and residential developments that all looked identical in the desert heat. The driver tried making conversation. "Missed your flight?" "No," I said, staring out the window. "I caught something more important. My house appeared ahead, single-story ranch with the workshop I'd built myself 20 years ago. Ricardo's car wasn't in the driveway. They were in Vegas, wondering why their plan had failed, scrambling to adjust. I paid the driver, walked up the path I'd laid with my own hands, unlocked my front door. The house felt different now, violated. Knowing what had been plotted within these walls, discussed at my own dining table, planned in the guest house just 50 yards away, I went straight to my home office. The filing cabinet held decades of documentation, insurance policies, bank statements, legal papers, property deeds. I spread everything across my dining table, creating a systematic layout, chronological order, categorized by type. Engineer's methodology applied to my own survival. Hours passed. The desert sun faded to dusk, then darkness. I examined each document under good lighting, looking for inconsistencies, signs of tampering, evidence of the conspiracy Beverly had exposed. I found it. The life insurance beneficiary form dated 6 months ago, changing primary beneficiary from my niece in San Diego to Jennifer Mitchell. The signature at the bottom attempted to mimic my handwriting, but failed. The capital H in Harold was wrong, too elaborate. I never made that flourish. I photographed the document with my phone. Evidence preservation, step 1. More digging revealed additional horrors. Bank statements showing transfers I'd never authorized. $45,000 over 8 months. Siphoned in amounts small enough to escape casual notice. $2,000 in month 1, gradually increasing to $8,000 per month by the end. Smart, systematic theft. a power of attorney document granting Ricardo financial authority, signed with my forged name, medical records I'd never seen, documenting cognitive decline I'd never experienced. They'd been building a paper trail of my incompetence while I worked in my shop, maintained my house, lived my normal life, creating the fiction of a failing mind to justify their control, to explain away my death as natural consequence of deteriorating health. Evidence, timeline, motive, method. I spoke aloud to the empty room, old engineering habit resurfacing. They planned this for months, living in my guest house, eating my food, plotting my murder. The documents remained spread across my dining table. I didn't clean them up. They represented physical proof of betrayal, tangible evidence of how thoroughly I'd been deceived. Over the following weeks, I avoided Jennifer and Ricardo's concerned calls from Vegas, deflecting their attention with vague mentions of stomach trouble from the airport incident. Meanwhile, I researched attorneys, made discreet calls, organized evidence into color-coded folders. Maxwell Stone arrived precisely at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday in October, 6 weeks after the plane incident. Mid-50s, gray threading through his dark hair, expensive briefcase that spoke of successful practice. A state law specialist with 20 years' experience. "Mr. Mitchell, thank you for trusting me with this." He settled into the chair across from my desk. "Walk me through what you found." I slid the first folder across the desk. Maxwell's professional composure held through the first few pages, then began cracking as the scope revealed itself. Forged signatures, altered beneficiaries, fraudulent power of attorney. "When did you last review these documents personally?" "The insurance policy 5 years ago when I updated it for retirement." "And you never authorized any beneficiary changes?" "Never." "That policy was meant for my niece in San Diego. She's a nurse, putting herself through graduate school." Maxwell made notes, his writing quick and precise. "Your son-in-law, Ricardo Torres. What's his professional background?" "Accountant. Has access to tax software, document templates, knows financial systems inside and out." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "He created your incompetency narrative, made you look unreliable on paper while you were living normally." Maxwell opened his laptop, began running forensic accounting software on my bank records. Red flags appeared immediately, highlighted in crimson. $45,000 over 8 months, he said quietly. Systematic theft. Classic embezzlement pattern. I reached into my desk drawer, pulled out Ricardo's laptop. He left this when they moved to the guest house. I set up his accounts years ago. He never changed the passwords. Maxwell took the laptop, connected an external drive, began data recovery procedures. Within minutes, deleted emails resurrected themselves on the screen. Email chains between Ricardo and someone calling himself a medical consultant. Discussion of substances causing heart failure, untraceable in standard autopsy, particularly effective at high altitude. Prices negotiated, $15,000 for consultation and supply. Meeting arranged at a parking garage in downtown Phoenix. "This is a murder contract," Maxwell said flatly. "Your son-in-law negotiated your death like he was buying construction equipment." "Keep reading," I said. "There's more." He found the draft will on Ricardo's desktop. Everything left to Jennifer Mitchell and Ricardo Torres. My signature forged at the bottom, dated just 2 weeks before the Vegas trip. Maxwell leaned back, removed his glasses. When he looked at me again, his professional mask had dropped entirely. "Harold, this goes beyond estate fraud. This is conspiracy to commit murder, forgery, elder abuse, financial exploitation. We need to decide, bring in police now or build an ironclad case first." "Build the case first," I said without hesitation. "Make it undeniable. Then we strike." The legal process took 18 months. Not the weeks you see in movies, but the slow, methodical grinding of real justice. Maxwell filed protective orders, account freezes, power of attorney revocations. We gathered additional evidence, security camera footage I'd installed, witness statements from neighbors who'd been pressured to lie about my competence, forensic analysis of the forged documents. Ricardo's gambling debts emerged during discovery. $125,000 owed across 3 casinos and 2 private bookmakers. The timeline matched perfectly with the theft from my accounts and the acceleration of their murder planning. Jennifer tried to contact me dozens of times during the investigation. I never answered. Let her wonder what I knew, how much evidence I'd gathered. In construction, you learn that pressure reveals structural weaknesses. I wanted to see where they'd crack first. The trial came in spring, almost 2 years after that flight to Vegas. Beverly testified via video link. Her recording played for the jury. Jennifer's voice filled the courtroom, discussing pills and altitude and my $650,000 life insurance. The forensic accountant detailed the systematic theft. The document examiner confirmed signature forgeries. Dr. Dorothy Reed, the court-appointed psychiatrist, testified to my complete mental competency, destroying their incompetency defense entirely. When I took the stand, 40 years of project presentations had prepared me well. I spoke clearly, methodically, like I was explaining a construction timeline to a client. When did you first suspect something was wrong? The Vegas invitation was unusual, their sudden attention after months of distance. Small inconsistencies that pattern recognition tells you matter. What did you do? What I'd taught young engineers for 40 years: gather evidence, document everything, verify sources, build comprehensive case before drawing conclusions. I applied engineering rigor to my own survival. The jury deliberated 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. On count 1, conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty. Down the list. Each guilty verdict hit Jennifer and Ricardo visibly. Jennifer's composure finally cracked. Ricardo dropped his head into his hands. Judge Martinez was clear in sentencing. Jennifer received 4 years probation with strict conditions. Ricardo 6 years due to his financial expertise and gambling debt motive. Both ordered to repay $45,000 stolen funds plus $75,000 punitive damages. Permanent restraining order. All inheritance rights permanently revoked. This case represents calculated, systematic betrayal of familial trust, Judge Martinez stated. Your victim's mercy in requesting probation rather than imprisonment is more than you deserve. 6 months later, I'm teaching project management at Phoenix Community College twice a week. Volunteer work, no pay needed. I have stories worth telling, lessons worth sharing. Students should know that systematic thinking protects, documentation matters, and justice, though slow, arrives for those patient enough to pursue it properly. My house is quiet now, but peaceful. The guest house sits empty. I've thought about renting it out, maybe to a young engineer just starting their career. Someone who understands that you build things to last, that trust is the foundation of any solid structure. I still have Beverly's contact information. We exchange Christmas cards now. She transferred to the East Coast, wanted a fresh start. Her father would be proud, she wrote last year. Justice delayed isn't justice denied. That's enough. That's everything.